This story comes from the ancient beliefs of Greece, a real myth mentioned in writings that are thousands of years old. If you enjoy stories that leave quiet questions in your heart before you fall asleep, please subscribe and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now. They say, before love ever existed, there was only the sea, endless, silent, and alone. And one night, the sea looked at itself and wished for something more. From the foam it carried on its waves, a woman was born, wrapped in light, but with sadness in her eyes. The gods called her Aphrodite, the goddess of love. But one question has always remained. If she was the goddess of love, why could she never find peace within herself? She was desired by everyone, yet loved by no one. The one who gave beauty to the world could never feel beautiful inside. Was her beauty a gift or a punishment? They say every heart she touched was changed forever. Some became mad, some were destroyed, and some became immortal. So it makes you wonder, was she a blessing from the sea, or a reminder that love, no matter how divine, always comes with a price? Tonight, as the world grows quiet, let's drift into her story, because somewhere between her birth and her heartbreak, we might find the answer we've all been searching for. The sea was silent, so deep it seemed even sound would drown in it. The night was dark, and the moonlight shimmered across the water like an old dream breathing softly. They say, on that night the sea looked upon itself, and for the first time felt lonely. The waves began to rise, foam turning silver under the moon's gaze. And from that foam a figure emerged. As she opened her eyes, the world stopped. The wind stilled, the waves froze, and even the gods paused to watch. Her name was Aphrodite, the goddess of love, but the light that surrounded her carried a quiet sadness. Because she wasn't born from a mother's womb, she was born from blood and sea foam, beauty born out of chaos, love born out of loneliness. When her feet touched the shore, flowers bloomed. Life awakened wherever she walked. But everything that became beautiful around her was destined to fade too soon. Zeus watched from above. Hera turned away in envy, and the gods knew the world would never be the same again. Love had arrived, and wherever love appears, peace cannot stay for long. People began to build temples in her name, offered roses, whispered prayers, and begged for love to bless their hearts. But no one ever asked her, "What do you want?" Maybe that's the curse of beauty. Everyone looks at you, but no one really sees you. They say when Aphrodite looked into her own reflection, for a moment, she couldn't recognize herself. Every eye that saw her changed. Every heart that loved her burned. Love, the thing everyone longed for, was for her a burden. Then came Hephaestus, the god of fire. He loved her deeply. He built her jewels that sparkled like stars, but they felt like chains. She smiled when he gave them to her, but inside, she felt something break. Because love, when it cages you, isn't love at all. Then came Ares, the god of war. His heart was wild, fierce, and untamed. And for the first time, Aphrodite felt alive. Their love was fire meeting storm, loud, reckless, beautiful. But when love becomes noise, its ending is always silence. At night, when they were together, The gods looked away. It was a love filled with flames and ashes, a love that could destroy and yet create. They say it was from them that love's first wounds were born, because desire and pain have always walked side by side. Maybe love was never meant to heal us, but to test us. Time passed. People prayed to her, built altars, swore vows in her name, but Aphrodite remained quiet. Every new admirer, every new promise, left her a little more alone. One evening, she returned to the sea, the place where everything began. The water was calm. The moon leaned close, watching her. She saw her reflection ripple in the waves, and softly asked, "Does the sea still remember me? Was I a blessing or a mistake?" The sea didn't answer. It only sighed, like an old friend, too tired to speak. Maybe love has always been like that, beautiful but wordless, a silent force that breaks us open, so we can learn what we truly are. They say Aphrodite sat there for a long time that night. The wind tangled in her hair, the waves kissed her feet, and she closed her eyes. Then she smiled, as if she finally understood that love was never meant to be perfect. It is born from pain, it lives in sacrifice, and it dies quietly in the space between two heartbeats. Perhaps that's why love is still a mystery. We live for it, we lose ourselves in it, and we spend our lives trying to understand it. And maybe the next time a wave touches the shore, it won't just be water, but the memory of Aphrodite herself, still alive, in the heart of the sea. The morning light touched the sea when she first saw him, Ares, the god of war. The world would remember her as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, but they would never know that her greatest love was also her greatest punishment. She had everything: beauty that could silence gods, a voice that could calm storms, and a presence so radiant that even the wind whispered her name. But beauty, when it belongs to everyone, can never truly belong to anyone. Aphrodite's heart was a secret, even from Olympus, because for her, love was never a gift. It was a wound that refused to heal. Hephaestus, the god of fire, was her husband. He loved her with patience and built her thrones of gold, jewels that sparkled like sunlight on still water. But each gift felt heavier than the last. Every treasure reminded her that she was trapped, a goddess of love who had never been free. Hephaestus was kind, gentle, but his love burned too quietly, and love that has no fire slowly turns to ash. Then came Ares, fierce, untamed, dangerous. He didn't bow, he didn't whisper. He looked at her as if she wasn't a goddess, but a storm he wanted to lose himself in. Their first glance was a spark, their first touch a rebellion, and from that moment, the sky itself began to whisper. The goddess of love had fallen for the god of war. Their secret meetings became legend, hidden between the clouds, where thunder couldn't judge and light couldn't see. They loved as if each moment was stolen. Every heartbeat, a risk. Every breath, a secret. When they touched, the air shimmered. When they argued, the heavens trembled. And when they kissed, even the stars turned away. It was a love too strong to be contained, and too fragile to survive. Because love that defies the gods always comes with a price. Hephaestus eventually discovered the truth. His hands, once steady as steel, began to shake. He forged a trap, a net so fine it was invisible, so strong that even gods couldn't escape it. He waited until the lovers were asleep, entwined in each other's arms. And then he cast the net. The next sound was laughter. Not theirs, but the laughter of Olympus. Zeus, Poseidon, Apollo. They all came to see the goddess of love and the god of war. Caught in chains of shame, Aphrodite didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply looked at the sky, and for a moment, even the sun dimmed. That day, she learned what love truly costs. Not just passion, not just heartbreak, but dignity and silence. After that day, the gods never saw her the same. Some pitied her, some mocked her, some feared her. But even bound in humiliation, her eyes still held power, the kind of beauty that couldn't be erased, even by disgrace. Time passed, and the laughter faded, but the wound remained. She returned to the sea, where it all began. The waves rose to greet her like an old friend. The air smelled of salt and sorrow. She looked down at her reflection, soft, trembling, rippling in the dark water, and whispered, "Was I a blessing or a mistake?" The sea didn't answer. It only sighed, a long, tired breath that carried centuries of secrets. And in that silence, she understood. Love was never gentle. It demands. It burns. Takes. It gives beauty only to test how long we can bear it. She closed her eyes and let the tide reach her feet. "I gave them love," she whispered, "and they turned it into a weapon." The wind moved softly through her hair. The waves wrapped around her ankles like memory. Maybe love was never meant to be safe. Maybe it was meant to remind gods and mortals alike that even the brightest hearts can be broken. That night, the stars reflected on the water, each one flickering like a heartbeat that refused to fade. And as the tide carried her voice away, only one truth remained. Even the goddess of love was never free from the price of her own creation. They say even gods are afraid of loneliness, but Aphrodite, the goddess of love, knew it better than anyone. For centuries, mortals prayed to her. Lovers called her name. Poets wrote of her grace. And yet, in all those voices, not one ever reached her heart. She gave the world the feeling of love, but she could never feel it the way mortals did. Every glance she cast, every smile she gave, made hearts burn, kingdoms fall, wars begin. Her name became the echo of desire, and desire, like the sea she was born from, was never still. She watched the world love and lose, watched people promise forever, and then break within moments. She saw mortals cry for love, and die for it, and she wondered, if love always ends in pain, why do they still keep searching for it? In the quiet corners of Olympus, Aphrodite would walk alone. The other gods would look at her, with admiration or envy or fear. None of them dared speak her truth, that love, in its purest form, was not a blessing. It was a mirror, showing everyone what they feared most about themselves. Sometimes, she would stand at the edge of the clouds, looking down at mortals sleeping beside the ones they loved. She would see their arms wrapped around each other, their hearts steady in peace. And for a moment, she wished she could feel that too. But gods do not sleep, and gods do not dream. They remember. She remembered every name whispered to her, every prayer, every heartbreak offered at her altar. The sound of longing had become her lullaby. The tears of mortals had become her crown. And yet the goddess of love was utterly alone. They say one night she went to visit Eros, her son, the god of desire. He found her sitting by the fire, eyes reflecting the flames, and asked softly, "Mother, why do you look sad? You are love itself." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the problem," she said. "When you are love, you don't get to have it." Eros stayed silent. He had seen the way mortals chased her, not because they understood love, but because they wanted to possess it. That night when he left, Aphrodite stood before the mirror made by Hephaestus long ago. In its reflection, she didn't see a goddess. She saw a woman, tired, beautiful, and endlessly searching. She touched her reflection and whispered, "Who are you when no one is watching?" The mirror didn't answer. It only trembled with the faint hum of her own heartbeat. They say she began to walk the world disguised as mortal, her golden glow hidden, her divinity quieted by the weight of curiosity. She wanted to know what love felt like, not as a goddess but as a woman. In a small village, she watched two lovers sitting by the sea, hands entwined, eyes full of peace. They had nothing, no crowns, no beauty, no eternity, and yet their hearts looked full. She watched them for hours, the way they spoke softly, the way they forgave each other's flaws without words. And for the first time, Aphrodite felt something stir within her, a warmth that wasn't born of worship, but of understanding. She realized love didn't need temples or altars. It didn't need beauty or divinity. It only needed truth. When she returned to Olympus, she said nothing to the gods, but her silence carried more wisdom than any prophecy. They noticed she no longer demanded offerings, no longer asked for devotion. When lovers prayed to her, they felt something different, not passion, but calm, because the goddess had learned that love isn't the fire that consumes you, it's the warmth that remains after everything else is gone. Still, she sometimes returned to the sea, the same sea that gave her life. She would stand in the shallow waves, letting the foam wrap around her ankles, and listen, and in that quiet, she could almost hear the whispers of mortal hearts, their fears, their hopes, their longing. Every sound carried a reminder that love will always hurt, but it will also always return. The tide will rise, the heart will break, and both will begin again. As the moonlight touched her skin, Aphrodite closed her eyes and smiled, because now she understood. Love was never meant to be possessed. It was meant to be felt, and perhaps that was her greatest gift to the world, to show that even gods, in all their power and beauty, are still searching for the same thing we are. Not perfection, not eternity, just a moment where the heart feels seen. They say every goddess is born twice, once from the world, and once from the choices she makes. Aphrodite's second birth came not from the sea, but from pain. The centuries had changed, but her loneliness had not. The temples built in her name were now ruins. The statues that once gleamed with gold were now covered in dust. But love, her creation, had survived everything. It had destroyed empires. It had built new ones. It had broken hearts, healed them, and broken them again. And yet, even after all this time, Aphrodite still wondered if love could ever truly belong to anyone. She had seen mortals rise and fall in its name, kings giving up their crowns for a single touch, queens choosing death over losing their lovers, heroes walking into wars just to prove their devotion. And every time, she whispered the same words, "Don't worship love, understand it," because she had lived long enough to know that love is not gentle. It is not fair. It gives and takes without warning. It can turn the purest heart into a stranger, and the kindest soul into something unrecognizable. Still, despite everything, she couldn't hate it, because love was her reflection. Beautiful, flawed, and impossible to escape. One evening, when the sky was soft and painted in gold, Aphrodite walked through a garden that no mortal had ever seen. It was said to bloom only when her heart was calm. But that night it was silent, the flowers closed, the air still, the scent faint and fading. She looked at the roses, her favorite once, and thought of Adonis, the mortal who had once loved her not for her divinity, but for her silence. He was gone now, long returned to the earth. Yet she could still feel him in every breeze, in every heartbeat of the living world. They say she still visits the place where he died, touching the ground that drank his blood. And from that soil the first red rose was born, a symbol of beauty and loss woven together forever. That was her gift to mortals, a flower that would remind them that love and pain are the same root, growing in opposite directions, but always connected. As she walked, She thought of the world that had moved on. People no longer called her name at night. They no longer feared her power, no longer built temples to please her. But she didn't mind, because in every heartbeat, in every small act of affection, she still lived. A man holding his child for the first time. A woman forgiving someone who hurt her. Two strangers sharing a quiet smile in the dark. These were her new prayers. Silent, honest, human. She had become part of the air itself. Not seen, not worshipped, but felt. For the first time in eternity, Aphrodite felt peace. Not the kind born of worship, but the kind that comes when you finally stop fighting what you are. She looked up at the sky, the same sky that had watched her rise from the sea, watched her love, and lose, and love again. The stars flickered like the eyes of old gods watching quietly, and she whispered to them, "I understand now. Love doesn't belong to gods or mortals. It belongs to itself." The wind carried her voice over the ocean, over sleeping cities, over hearts that didn't even know they were listening. Somewhere, a lonely soul stirred, feeling warmth without knowing why. Somewhere, two hands reached for each other in the dark. And somewhere, a tear fell. Not of sadness, but of recognition. Because even now, even after the myths have faded, she still moves between us. In the space between words, in the pause between heartbeats, in the quiet moments when we realize we are not alone in wanting to be loved. The sea, her first home, shimmered beneath the moon. Its waves rose gently, like it was welcoming back what it had once given away. Aphrodite stepped into the water, feeling it embrace her like memory. The foam kissed her feet, the wind brushed her hair, and for the first time since her birth, she felt whole. The goddess of love had found her answer, not in beauty, not in worship, not in desire, but in understanding. Love was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be real. As the tide pulled her deeper into the sea's calm rhythm, her voice faded into the night, a whisper carried by the waves. Love is not about forever. It's about being brave enough to begin again.